happening in the computer revolution, because about every 18 months we were doubling the power essentially that we were getting from these devices for the same price point, and that became known as Moore's law. And Moore predicted that this might last for about 10 years. Well, it's lasted for nearly 50 years at this stage. So we're seeing a doubling of computational performance every 18 months or so over the last number of decades. So much so that if we go from the 1960s, we were getting about 0.05 of these basic computations per dollar. Today in my phone, I'm getting about 8 million of these computations per dollar. My phone is thousands upon thousands of times more powerful than that supercomputer, which weighed thousands of times more than my phone. If the automotive industry had moved at the same speed, in the same way, we'd be driving around in cars that would cruise comfortably at 1 million miles an hour. We'd get about 1 million miles per gallon of diesel, and it'd be cheaper just to chuck our car away at the end of the day rather than park it overnight in a city garage. Clearly the motor industry didn't develop at the same pace. But that's why we've gotten to where we are, that these computational devices that we're so used to are now so incredibly powerful and so cheap for that power that a whole new type of world is possible when we start to knit these together and connect these together. And often people talk about the sensor web, because what we're finding is that things that were kept inside of these machines, inside the virtual world of the internet, it's now leaking out into the physical world, because our physical world is being equipped with sensors. So we're now able to read a lot of what is going on in the world around us and influence what is going on in the world around us. And I'd like to take you on a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the things that I think are really interesting about what's happening in the sensor web, particularly in the area of healthcare and how that will be disrupted over the next number of years. And we look at this from the perspective of the mobile phone, which we think of, well, most people still think of it as a phone. It's very far from being a phone. It's not even a very good phone anymore, in my opinion. It's a great internet device and a great data device, but it's an even better sensing platform. And when you think about all the different sensors that exist on these devices, which we carry around with us every day, light sensors, microphones, GPS location, digital compasses, and so on and so forth. And then we realise that, more or less, they're always in power. So powering sensors used to be a big challenge. If you're deploying water quality sensors in a river system, how do you keep those sensors powered all of the time? Well, we keep these sensors powered all of the time. They're always connected to high-speed data, pretty much, and they're mobile, and they know where they are. So that's a very powerful idea. And it promises to completely disrupt many different aspects of the world in which we live. And I think healthcare is a good case study. This is Eric Topol. He's a cardiologist in the US, and a couple of years ago he was on a plane travelling across the country, and another passenger was taken ill. And Eric had a small ultrasound device connected to his iPhone, and he was able to diagnose the patient was having a particular type of heart attack, was able to do the right thing there and then on the plane, and the patient recovered when they landed subsequently. But that just points to the disruption that's happening. An ultrasound scanner connected to an iPhone. Who would have thought that would be possible only a few years ago? But let's have a look at some of the things that are possible today and that we probably are using in apps that we have. For any of you who are into exercise and fitness, running, swimming, walking, cycling, many of us who are doing these activities are tracking our activity on an app. I use an app called Runkeeper. Every time I go out, I wear one of these Jawbone devices, which is tracking my activity. It knows not just how much I exercise, when I exercise. If I'm wearing a heart monitor, it knows my cardiac rhythms during my exercise, where I go, the altitude I go up or down, who I'm with, times of day. It knows my gender, my weight, my age. Imagine that information going back to my GP. Not just on a periodic once-a-year checkup, but a long-term track of my activity information going back to my carers. I think that's a very interesting idea. Imagine how valuable this is to the likes of Nike and Adidas. in terms of developing next generation health equipment. People are using apps to track your sleep. You can get a free app for your phone, you put the phone under your pillow and it tracks your sleep based on movement during the night. Devices like this also track my sleep. I thought I was a poor sleeper, and so I was kind of a bit obsessed about my sleep patterns, and I started tracking my sleep. I'm not really that poor a sleeper at all, which made me feel a lot better about my sleep patterns, which got me to sleep a lot faster. So now I'm a really good sleeper all of a sudden. But we're tracking this over long periods of time for free using our phones. Who would have thought that a phone was tracking our sleep? You've got some companies now that are even able to track our mood and our focus. Unfortunately, you have to wear a headband, but no doubt that will change in time as well. People are tracking their food and their nutrition. How is that going to change healthcare when doctors understand on a meal-by-meal basis what you're eating? I have a heart rate sensor on my phone. I put my finger over the camera. It tracks my heart rate in real time by looking for tiny colour changes in my skin as it shines the flash on my finger. So as my heart beats, the colour of my skin as blood flow changes, and it tracks that. I can point the camera at my face, it'll measure my heart rate based on tiny colour changes in my face. Again, there's no extra sensor on the phone, it's just the camera, but we're able to track people's heart rate. And where people are able to do that, not just once or twice a year when they go for a checkup, but maybe before exercise, during exercise, after exercise. Here's an interesting one. It's not in the market yet, but it was an experiment to see what you could do with the speaker on the phone. This is mobile spirometry. This is a lung function test. So the patient here is just blowing into the speaker on the phone, and it's able to do a standard clinical lung function test within about 5% of clinical accuracy. So that's good enough for home usage, for people who are suffering from asthma, for example, or other lung issues, just by blowing into the speaker on your phone. All for free, all as part of a device that you carry with you everywhere. So one of the things I'd like you to think about is, how might this change healthcare? Now, I think healthcare will be slow to change, but I think it'll be us, the patients and the consumers, that drag it with us. So might we be going into a doctor with our apps, with our data, loading it up to the doctor's system? There was BBC did a Horizon documentary on this recently, where they talked about, instead of going away with the prescription, maybe you'll go away with a new app on your phone, because your GP wants to look at some particular aspect of your activity or measure some particular trait, and there's an app available to do that. So go away, let this app monitor you for a couple of weeks, come back and we'll take a look at where we are. I think that's a very real possibility. So we have access to this data now. It's valuable data. We'll come back to that point in a while. But it's data that could fundamentally change the healthcare system and the quality of healthcare that we get. So that instead of periodic once or twice a year checkups, we're bringing long-term, longitudinal physiological data with us. One of the really interesting things, though, is that it's not just about individuals carrying phones and sensing their individual activities. We can scale this up across entire populations. These phones are going to be equipped with more and more sensors, so we scale it vertically. We're measuring more and more about individuals. And of course then, they will scale horizontally. We can start to connect up these sensors into large networks that would be far too expensive to build by traditional means. And this has led to this idea called participatory sensing, where individuals form a sensor network which can start to read interesting things about the world that we're in. I'll give you my favourite example of this. There's a US company called Propeller Health, and they produce a sensor that goes into a standard rescue inhaler. It's about $1 sensor. And all it does is it knows when the inhaler has been used. But it's connected to the patient's phone. So it knows when the inhaler has been used, it knows where the user was when they used that inhaler, because the phone knows where it is. So why is that useful? Well, imagine connecting that up. So now you have a city with thousands of people using these inhalers. And the interesting thing about inhaler use, it tends to be heavily correlated with air quality, for example. So now you have an air quality sensor network. by accident almost, that would cost millions to build by traditional means, where it means putting physical sensors on lampposts, for example. All because of a dollar sensor that was designed originally to tell you when you were running out of medication on your inhaler and when you needed to restock. There are all sorts of examples of how ideas like this, connecting sensors together, are transforming many traditional industries. And one of them is the mapping industry. It used to be that Google bought satellite companies so they would be able to build accurate maps of the world. But now we have companies like Waze, which, not surprisingly, were subsequently bought by Google. But Waze built their maps by giving everyone a free smartphone app that just tracked where you went. And as you went about your business, went about your commute, essentially an empty map started to be filled in by the trails that people would take through the world. And those trails were reinforced so that you could start to confidently assert that they were roads or pathways. And then you would invite people, and everyone doesn't have to do this, but enough people were willing to mark down the names of the roads and express points of interest, for example. And all of a sudden you have real-time maps of the world developing out of the activities of many millions of individual users, without expensive mapping software needing to be developed. And not only that, because the phones are being carried with you, it doesn't just give you a static map of the world, it actually gives you information about traffic congestion. So Waze knows that there's a lot of traffic in this part of Manhattan at the moment, for example, because the phones are going slower than they usually are at this time of the day. So there's a lot of benefits coming from this sort of sensor web thinking. And it's all about turning people into sensors, essentially, and inviting people to participate in these sensor networks. And it starts with lots of messy data, but we now have the algorithms to clean that data up and to discover real, genuine insights, such as poor air quality in this part of the city, don't travel that way to work this morning, take this route, or traffic congestion is particularly bad at the moment down there, go this way. It's all based on the smartphone as a sensor platform and the willingness of people to contribute their data. It's not just what we're doing in the physical world. We're also used to data being generated in the online world. And it's this rather unfortunate phrase, mining the data exhaust. As we pass through the world, we leave an exhaust trail behind us which can be mined. And there's very valuable information in that. It's the pages that we look at, the time we spend reading those pages, even the mouse movements that we make as we use the browser, for example, our search queries. And companies like Google, of course, have been particularly successful at mining page relevance and user reputation by the links that people follow.